Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Brian Pickowicz here at the Fitness Project. I hope you're having a great day, and I want to give you a little context as you dive into this video because it's a little bit different than some of the things that we've offered here on the channel. So this is a talk that I did for one of our clients at the Fitness Project. I did this talk for his company at the beginning of the year, and it's really focused on understanding the science of habits and how to improve your daily actions in order to get to where you want to be. And so this is a client who we've worked with here at the Fitness Project for a few years now. Originally, he had come to us because he had sacrificed his health to build his business. And he was the heaviest weight he'd ever been. He realized that he had to rework some of the ways he was taking care of himself so he could continue to grow. Now he's down 60 pounds. He said, "Hey, Brian, I've seen so many great changes by working with you. I'd love it if you could come and talk to our company." So this talk is really grounded in understanding the science of habits and the power of incremental growth. So what you'll see is it's all about closing the gap, knowing where you are, where you want to be, and then designing the right daily actions that will get you to your goal. So if you're someone who is looking at your health and your fitness, you're going to take a lot away from this because you'll see how habits actually show up, but you can also apply this to your business. You can apply this to your career. You can apply it to your marriage if you want to, but I think that there's a lot here, and I want to give you a little context as you dive in. So in transparency, audio's there, the video's there too, but it does show up a little bit bright, I'll say. So I hope that the content within it is valuable for you, and I'd love to hear your biggest takeaways, your biggest insights in the comment section below. So on that note, we'll dive in, and I'll see you on the other side. So I'm excited because it is about building a culture of excellence, right? And I've had the pleasure of working with Matt for 2 years, now meeting you all, and it looks like there's a lot of momentum. Now when we look at the start, though, it's about closing the gap, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, is how do you close the gap? So the goal is to teach you how to leverage the power of small habits so you can win the year ahead and build a culture of growth, because a culture of growth is not just a culture of people who show up and they say, "I want to win." It's people who are doing the actions of winning. So, simple question, who here wants to make more money this next year? Who wants to serve more customers? Love it, fantastic. And who also wants to increase their ability to lead, influence, and contribute, right? All those pieces are so important. And then also tying it down, who wants to get around winners? Who wants to have a culture of growth where they're just around people who are here to win, playing to win? That's the tone that we're setting consistently, all right? That's the mission of today. The mission of today, from me to you, is to show you the most effective way to close the gap between everything you did last year and where you want to be at the end of the year. And the result of doing that is you're going to be able to serve more customers, you're going to drive revenue, and you're going to have a winning culture. And what's wonderful about those three pieces is they come together so seamlessly once habits are in place. It's really easy. Matt's established your values. Values are the hierarchy points that allow you to make decisions, right? We have these values in place, this is the way we do things, and then your culture, through your habits, allows you to either reinforce them to the right people or shows you who aren't the right people, right? Because if we have a certain standard of the way we do things, and these are our values, and people don't uphold them, well, there's a system that we can make sure that either says, hey, this is what we correct, or obviously we remove those people. But when it's just chaos, then it's really hard to figure out, well, did the person fail? Did the system fail? Did the values fail? By knowing that sets you up for success. And so when we talk about the gap is really the point by which you are where you are today, you know where you want to be at the end of the year. So Matt's already outlined those 2 points. But what we know is that there's a distinct amount of space between those 2 points. Right? And you can think about this in anywhere in your life. You might want to have a wonderful relationship, and we're always fighting. There's a gap. You have to fill it. Or I'm trying to lose weight, and this is where I want to be. Well, there's a gap. Right? There's always a gap. And so the key in understanding that, and really what I want to get across today, is in order to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be, you have daily opportunities to do that. A lot of times people think, well, I just have to motivate myself, or I need to do more. It's like those are really helpful principles to adopt, but realistically, in order to excel this year, you have 352 opportunities to win. And this is one of them, which is exciting because how many other companies are working on a Saturday, putting in the time and effort to get started for the rest of the year? That creates leverage. So every day, if you do one small thing to win, you're automatically moving closer to closing the gap. And what's wonderful is you're not going to just do one small thing. Right? A lot of times that's the baseline, but if we have that foundation, what you'll see throughout the talk, things start to really hit that bell curve where you see the hockey stick. And that's where habits become really powerful. Now, again, the way to close the gap isn't motivation. It's not just, all right, I'm going to adopt a new mindset. It's like, that's helpful, but what does that even mean? For one, mindset's a very broad word, just like motivation, right? And now the key other factor is understanding it's not just about working longer hours, because it's going to create a culture where people end up thinking, well, if I just work more, I get more done. Not necessarily true. Now, you're going to have to work hard. That's innate in order to be successful, but those aren't the two factors. The real factor that's going to make the difference is your daily routines and habits. And you think about the routines and habits you already have in place, the way you answer the call, the way you funnel the lead. All those routines and practices, the more they can get dialed in, the more effective you become. Everyone, I think we're tracking. Fantastic. Now my goal today is to start to impart just this mindset, this actual belief system that we are what we repeatedly do. Right? So this is a quote that I believe everyone associates to Aristotle. It's actually from an English author, William Durant. He says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellent, then, is not an act, it's a habit. We talked about Bill Belichick, I think, at the beginning of this talk. Mm-hmm. The Patriots won for 24 years. Not because they had the best quarterback or they had the best coach. They had the best systems. They had the best values and systems, and those reinforced over decades. Anyone who's really successful, that's the way they're operating. Now, to introduce myself, my name is Brian Pickowicz. I'm the head coach and the co-founder of the Fitness Project. And what we do is build fit, healthy leaders. This is my lovely wife. She's fantastic. She wanted to be here. I was like, hey, maybe just me right now.
No, I wish you were here.
But what we focus on is building fit, healthy leaders. And a lot of what's going to happen today is obviously what I focus on is your physical state. I believe that when you're healthy, when you're strong, it permeates through everything that you do. And that's why we work with business owners and entrepreneurs or career-driven professionals who really know, like, hey, if I'm healthy, I make more money, I'm a better leader, I'm a better parent, I'm more present with my loved one. Yeah. So everything that we do is about dialing in the individual. And our core belief, these are our coaches, Stephen, who's Matt's worked with, Caitlin, that's also why Lindsey's not here. It's Caitlin's birthday. Oh. So she's turning 30. She's like, it's my birthday. Oh. And they're having a big party. I'm here instead. But our core belief is that when you effectively lead yourself, it allows you to lead others. So every great leader starts by leading themselves. Now, leadership is going to look different for each individual, but the key is understanding the way we take care of ourselves permeates in everything we do. Simply put, when you get better, everything else gets better. You're managing your energy, you're managing your emotions, you're managing the way that you're engaging with your day. It causes that ripple effect because you're at the center of your own universe. It's really hard if you're not taking care of yourself or you're not happy with yourself to transfer something positive to others. And I think that that's the key. It's that transference, right? Transferring that state or that influence to others. So again, habits are everything. By developing better ones and then understanding how to break the ones that limit you, that's how you continue to transform yourself. And as a result of transforming yourself, it transforms your family, it transforms your friends, your relationships, your organizations, and communities. So, tying it all down, it's like, okay, Matt said, what's in it for you? What are we going to actually talk about today? It's not just about habits. I want to give you some pieces you can implement. That's just kind of tying it down. So again, we lead ourselves, our routines, habits, they permeate in everything we do. And over the course of our journey, we've worked with over 1,000, the most ambitious business owners, professionals, helping them dial in their habits so that they continue to perform and be their best. My aim, though, is a little bit more, say, nuanced in how it's going to support you, because I want to do two things today. I want to start by talking about maybe some habits that will influence you, right? How can you build better habits for yourself? You're going to have your own answers. I don't know what those are. It's more just teaching you the principles so you can walk into the rest of the year and say, okay, hey, maybe I want to start doing this one thing, or maybe I can understand other people's habits a little bit better, right? Because once we understand how to influence ourselves, it's a lot easier to influence others. And then we're going to talk about organizational habits. So specifically, what business habits do we have to put in place? What are some ways that we can think about habits and how it impacts the way we engage with our team, the way we engage with our customers, the way that we're fulfilling our product? So if we can start with ourselves, it'll permeate into what we're doing as a team. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Sweet. Boom Zeus. I love it. So the rules of the game. Simple rules for today. Give it your all. So let's play like a team. Let's have some fun, right? So obviously you're engaged, you're taking notes. That's fantastic. Let's continue that process. The more feedback you give me, the more I can continue to serve you. And remember, you're a team, right? Everyone's sharing openly, vulnerably, holding space for each other, making sure that it's a space of transparent and open feedback. Last piece is bring the energy. So I want to bring the fun. I want to, like I said, there's 4 people here. Let's act like 1,000, right? Let's actually step into that state. And the more you're actually, the wonderful thing is that the more you're stepping into the state of someone who's leading 100 or 1,000, you're actually more likely to start doing that.
Yeah.
Now, to do this, we're going to put it all into practice. Okay, so I'm going to have you guys stand up. And we're just going to do a simple little exercise to get some actual energy in the room.
Okay.
So I'm going to start off, we're going to widen out our hands, and we're going to just make some circles. Keep your hands stretched out, stretched out. We're going to do 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to have you make knives with your hands, okay? So you're going to bring them here, all right? And then what I'm going to have you do, I'll show you. You're going to open up here, and all we're doing is trying to open up the back of your shoulders. We're going to do 15 of these. So start going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Should feel a little burn. 8, 9, 10. You got 5 more.
Nobody told me I was
1,
working out today.
2, 3,
7 a.m. workout
4,
Oh no.
5. Fantastic. And now we're going to do one last thing, okay? So this is actually a challenge for you. What I want you to do, this is actually the best ab exercise in the world. Fun fact. So what we're going to do is, all I want you to do is put one leg in front of the other. You're going to get engaged here with your core, and then you're going to get running in place. Okay? So running in place, running in place. We're going to do 10, 9. Who's the fastest? Come on.
There we go.
8, 9, 10. Switch legs. Switch legs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there you go. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Awesome. Give yourself a round of applause. Now, fun fact. The reason why this is so helpful.
I didn't turn on my Apple Watch. It doesn't count. It doesn't count if you don't have it.
But if you actually notice, a lot of people have poor posture, especially when you're sitting all day. And the way that we want to start to offset that, opening up our shoulders. So those simple little exercises actually help to open up your chest. So that's why we do it, because when you're more open, breathe better, more effective. So you can sit down. I just wanted to play a little game, get a little energy, and get set to start. Now, quick little question. Who here plays video games or loves video games? Loved video games? You played video games as a kid?
I play them. Like, I'm not like a gamer, but like I'll play Mario Kart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm a competitive.
It's a better game.
Yeah, like I'm competitive. I like board games.
Okay.
Like.
What's your go-to board game?
Oh, I like really obscure board games.
That's okay.
You're one of those, huh?
So my board game of choice is called Arcadia. It's like a really nerdy board game.
I love it.
I love board
Like
games.
an RPG board game?
Well, I like co-op board games sometimes. Like if you've ever, there's a board game called Pandemic.
Yes,
So
okay.
you're working together as a team to
Yeah.
beat the board. That's what co-op board games are. So
Okay.
like the board, something will happen to the board. So in Pandemic, obviously, like we all went through it, right? There's outbreaks and there's
Yeah.
you know,
Donald
and
Trump,
so but
no.
you're working you're working together to beat the board.
Yeah.
And then I like competitive ones too, but I'm really competitive. So like Eric likes to play co-op games with me because then
That's
I
cool.
like that. Anyway,
Fantastic.
sorry.
Yeah, that's
That's
awesome.
all right. I love it. It's
Yeah.
I
fantastic.
learned something new
Anita,
today.
Yeah.
do you have any games you played, like video games or any? Have you ever been into any kind of game? That's okay.
No.
That's okay. Heads
No.
up. Heads up. That's all right. So either way, I want to use the idea of video games to get this point across, because when you think of video games, we're going to talk about Mario.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone knows Mario. It's a really great illustration for how we perform in our business and also how we perform in our life, because essentially, as you're going through the level, it's like your business cycle, right? Every month you know that there's going to be certain KPIs you have to hit, there's certain things you have to jump over. So that's essentially how you're going throughout your life. And there is a revenue target at the end, right? We want to always reach the goal, but we also know that in order for us to get to that goal and also exceed it, right, get points, there's little mushrooms, there's little skills, beliefs, and traits that we need along the way. And as you're going through the level, you can easily run through the business cycle, but you're probably not going to effectively hit your target. You might succeed at the end of the game, but you're not going to hit a high score. So we really want to hit a high score. We want to understand that the more we play the game, the easier it is to win. And the point of bringing up video games is, have you ever played a game for the first time and you're trying to figure out, like, what are the rules? Heads up. What are the rules? How do I play it?
It's the worst part on this.
Yes.
And that's what it's like building a new habit.
Yeah.
But the more that a routine behavior gets repeated, you start to actually go through the game really easy.
Yeah.
And you understand how to strategize. You understand new beliefs. Think about a game that you love to play. There's new beliefs about how you play the game. And so business is a game. So in order to advance to the next level, you got to play it like the person at the next level. And the way we can start doing that is by understanding our habits. So a habit is any regularly repeated behavior that requires little to no thought. Again, thinking of your brain like a controller. At first, when you're playing a game, you have to think, well, where's the bad guy? What's coming around the corner? How do I drop a banana? Right?
Yeah.
Mario Kart.
Well, that. Yeah.
And then once you get into the rhythm of it, though, it becomes very easy, almost automatic. And the best example of that is like Guitar Hero, right? At first, you're trying to figure out the buttons, and then once you get used to it, it's like, oh, I can play this easily, and now it's something I just show up and enjoy. The piece that I want to get across by talking about Mario is understanding that how you interact with the game is what's going to allow you to advance to the level, hit your revenue target, and develop those character traits. Skills, beliefs, character traits of how you show up. Now, most people think that it's really complex to build a habit. They think it's just random. But the truth is that every habit follows a cycle. So this comes from the book Atomic Habits. And the habit cycle is a routine that all of us fall into. Think of your phone. Phone goes off, there's an urge for you to engage in it, you pick it up, and the reward is variable, and that's actually what keeps you addicted to smartphones. So your smartphone gives you a variable reward, so you don't actually know what you're going to get. But every habit follows a cycle. This is helpful for you to understand for yourself, because you can build awareness. Every habit, whether it's a positive one or a negative one, follows the same cycle. And I'll show you how to break it in a moment.
I was gonna say, if you can break me in my phone habit.
Well, it's literally, it starts with what Matt started with at the beginning. As uncomfortable as that might have been to sit in a meditation for 10 minutes, what that's doing is it's helping you be aware of two things. First is your physiology. What happens to us is we act unconsciously based off of all these different inputs that are happening. So you think of your phone, you're sitting here right now and you're thinking about your phone. Even if you're not thinking about it, you're thinking, oh, well, has anyone texted me in the last hour? Right? There's something underneath the surface. And so the more we can build awareness around our body, it's going to tell us what we're thinking. So you think of, I've taught this to a couple of Matt's, I think it was the EOS group, but stress is an unconscious reaction oftentimes to a stimulus. And the stimulus is happening because the brain is making assessment is what's being asked of me more than I can actually give to it. So the demands exceed our capacity. So the point is, if you want to change a habit, first step is awareness. So if I can be aware of what's happening in my body that makes me want to pick the smartphone up, well then I can start to build awareness of when I'm going to pick up the smartphone, and then I can start changing a new action. Because the golden rule of habit change is you can't always control the cue, you're not going to be able to control how you feel, but you can always take a new action. Now the key is understanding what the reward is, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So I want to start, yeah, absolutely.
So you don't call bad habits addictions?
Well, an addiction is going to be, a bad habit can be an addiction when it's, so Aaron Drew Huberman, he's a neuroscientist from Stanford, defines addiction as a narrowing of what gives you pleasure. So the world starts to get narrower and narrower, and that's the only way that you feel like you can receive a reward. So I'm not qualified to talk about addiction, meaning like I'd really be mindful of like what that would look like, but what I would say is an addiction is going to be something that meets more than 2 of our human needs. So there's 6 human needs. Certainty, we all demand certainty. There's variety, we all have a need for spontaneity and things to be different. We also have a need for significance. We have a need for love and connection. And then we have a need for growth and contribution. So when you think of an addiction, it usually is something that gives you certainty and meets one of those other needs. And so there's positive ways we can meet the needs, and then there's negative ones. As far as the neuroscience of addiction, that's going to be a different conversation that someone who's more qualified than me can talk about. But what I would say is someone who is drawn to something is just more impulsive, and they have less awareness around the cycle. So you think of someone who associates this trigger happens, I go to this automatically. It's really that this cycle is happening. It's just become so conditioned and ingrained that the ability to choose a new action might not seem like they can do it. They might not have awareness around it, or I think the other piece is that they feel so uncomfortable in their body that they haven't been able to choose that other action yet. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I can stop saying I'm addicted to certain things, and I can just say, these are my bad habits.
Well, and that's a huge piece because
Maybe.
your language also influences your identity. So here's a really interesting one to consider. So the most influential part of your psychology is your identity. So how you identify with the problem makes the world of difference for your ability to change it.
Yeah.
So take someone who is trying to quit smoking.
I've done that.
Trying to quit is what they're doing. They're giving themselves credit for the attempt. Someone who becomes a non-smoker makes certain decisions. So if I walk into a room and I don't smoke cigarettes, I make certain decisions. I love cigars. I love nicotine. Like my brain gets wired the same way, but there's a certain belief that I hold about myself that influences what I do. So again, starting to build awareness around your language is another important piece. Because if I'm telling myself I'm addicted, what do you think underneath that's saying?
That I need it. Like the soda that's in here, I'm addicted to Pepsi.
Yeah.
And it's a habit, and I'm saying, or am I looking at it too severely, and that's why I'm not changing it? Because I'm, is that possible? Could that be,
Like you can enjoy wine, but you're telling yourself you're addicted, so you should just stop.
Yeah, stop it
And
all.
so, then it's also
So I'm
harder.
addicted to sugar, and so now it seems like you really want it now more.
Well, and so here's the piece too that's really important to understand. What you're saying is really powerful. Is if you're speaking that over yourself, it's going to happen, right? If you're saying I'm addicted to it, I'm just addicted to it. One of the things I really challenge a lot of people with is they say, well, it's just a habit. It's like, no. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So I'll jump to here because I think it'd be really important.
I'm sorry. If
No. This is
Okay.
This is why I'm here. So the piece to understand, so your language influences the way you're going to act. So the way you speak about yourself, the way you speak about a problem, there's a piece of it which is your thought, and then there's a piece of it which is your emotion. Now you do have to understand too, drinking sugar spikes dopamine in your brain, so it is highly rewarding. But I'm going to talk about morning routines for a second because it's going to link really well with what you're building awareness around. Again, I don't care what your morning looks like. All I want you to do is build awareness because you can start to see it for yourself and your organization. So everything starts with a cue. Your alarm clock goes off. Then there's this urge to stop the noise, right? And then you shut off the alarm, and if you're like me,
Snooze.
well, hold on. We're going to talk about that in a second. But the actual reward of shutting off my alarm clock is not waking up my spouse.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really care that I get up on time as much as I don't want her to get up, because I usually wake up early. So there's also the reward of silence, because it's an annoying sound. Now, the key to understand, and so this is really where you start to build awareness around what you're talking about with sugar or soda or anything that you feel like is such a pull for you, is it's starting with a cue. Now, that cue or that trigger might be physical. The phone goes off, right? Oh, I see it, and then I see the name, and it's like, oh, that's my mother. I need to really pick up that phone, right? Or it might be also something that's internal. And a cue can also be an emotion or a thought. So if you see sugar, you see the soda, that starts to create this craving or this urge. So one of the things you can do, is remove the stimulus. But if you can become aware of the urge or the feeling that comes before you take action, that's actually where you reinforce the decision. So think of it. One of the things that I've had to do a lot of work on, that's why I have really made this a big focus in my life. I have a tremendous habit of falling into anger. So I used to, Sumeda, who Matt brought up earlier, she was one of the people that really helped me understand my internal triggers and internal desires or cravings. And one of the things that happened is I can almost feel, before I'm about to respond to you and tell you something that's really going to ruin our relationship, there is a feeling and a change in my physiology. And so if we can build awareness around that, then I can change the habit. Doesn't mean, and there's nothing about being perfect, it's just trying to be a better person, which we'll talk about too. But if I can understand the trigger, then I can associate that needs to be a new action that follows. So it's almost like building awareness around the trigger or the cue so I can take a new action. Is that kind of strict? Okay. And now the other piece to understand is the end goal of every behavior is a reward. Only reason why we do anything is because it's rewarding. Even if that's not necessarily, most people think rewarding like, oh, I get a gold star, I get someone who says that's great, it feels really good. A reward can also be internal, it can be a thought. It might not be something that we really want to do, but we just fall into the habit of it. Like, you think of someone who smokes. I've worked with several clients who've broken their smoking habits, but the thing is the reward for smoking is peace, it's relaxation, it's a sense of certainty. So even though they know, like, hey, this is not good for me, the momentary feeling of the reward is what follows through. So to kind of illustrate this, the alarm clock goes off. We want to start to stop the noise. Anita, we hit what? What is the action when the alarm clock goes off?
Snooze.
And what is the reward?
More sleep.
More sleep, right? Now, if there's no consequences for that, we don't change the behavior. And that's why we hit snooze, 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 until, I gotta get up, and then it's fight or flight.
Yeah, I am super guilty of that.
Yep.
Set 6 alarms, dude.
Yep.
Not cool.
Yep. So, the key is understanding that if we understand the cycle, we might be able to change the habit. Now, there's a lot of nuance to this particular habit. I'm always fascinated when people are like, oh, I want to start waking up earlier. I'm like, okay, what time do you wake up right now? Like, I wake up at like 7 a.m. All right, what time do you want to wake up? 4:30. It's like, okay, well, can we shoot for 6?
Yeah.
Can we shoot for 6:30? Like, what do we have to do in order for you to feel like, A, you're still getting enough sleep, but also it's actionable? So, one piece to build off this is any behavior that gets rewarded gets repeated, right? So just anything inside a company, inside yourself, one of the pieces that will continue to build awareness around is that. Now, one of the things I want you to do quickly is just something that we can kind of build around is write your own habit cycle and establish what your morning routine looks like, right? It doesn't have to be multiple things. Just say the cue for me to wake up is, the urge for me to wake up is, action for me to wake up is, and then what is the reward? So building off of this, it's important to understand that habits start to stack, and that's how they create a chain reaction. So let's say I walk in the kitchen in the morning, that's my cue, there's an urge to make coffee, so I put on a pot of coffee, and then that starts my morning off the right way, but it also makes my wife really happy. So there's multiple rewards. Now the piece that happens after this is it triggers another habit to take place. And that other habit is the coffee's brewing, that's my cue. So I get this craving to be productive. Sometimes I get a craving to be on my phone, and that's also like that's another cue, like this is unproductive. So I put down my phone. Like I still get myself into the trap where I'm like, oh, I'm scrolling for 3 minutes, boom, put my phone down. But the action is I might do the dishes, I might clean the countertops because while the coffee is brewing, I just want to have a clean house and a clear mind. So this is an illustration of how habits start to stack together. In a business, people talk about routines and systems. That's all that we're building when we're building a new system. So a system is nothing more than a collection of routines and habits. So when you talk about how do we build better systems in our business, it's building better routines and habits. And the more we can collect those, the more we can create the right outcomes. I'm going to keep building off of this because what a system is there's a specific cue that requires a specific response. So, okay, I thought you were going to jump in. A specific cue that creates a specific response. So what happens when the client doesn't deliver on time? Well, what is our response? Like, that's a great example of, and maybe our system needs to be upgraded because maybe there's a drag on it. Or maybe there's a human drag, right? Meaning like there's too much drag because I have to be there. And so there's not an automatic system that we can put in place. You can always upgrade systems because systems are either reliant on technology or people. And the ultimate goal of a system is that when there's a specific response, there's a predictable reward. Right? There's a predictable reward. I know that if I check my profit and loss, I'm going to see what money's there. The reward is I feel calm, or I have certainty that the business is functioning the right way. There's something there that's rewarding, that's predictable. It might not give me the information I want, but at least it's somewhat predictable. It's the same thing when you think of building out different systems in the business. So the key understanding is that people don't rise to the level of their goals, they fall to the level of their systems. So this comes from James Clear. We do not rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. Your goal is the desired outcome, and your system is the collection of daily habits that will get you there. Right? You've all built really successful habits up to this point, and now we think of 50% growth, 100% growth. It's a different set of habits, which might be I need to delegate more. I need to hire someone who does the things I am currently doing so I can manage those people. That requires a different set of habits. But we have to continue to say, hey, if this is the goal that I want to accomplish, how can I create habits that allow me to follow through on those systems? Again, someone who is burnt out and unhealthy has a system they follow. Everyone has a system. Mm-hmm. The way they manage stress, the way they take care of their body, the way they handle relationships. Hey, they have a system, no judgment, but it's a system.
Yeah.
Just like someone who is fit and has a $100 million company, they have a system, right? And so if we want to get different results, we have to change our systems. So key point to tie down, better results equal better systems. Systems are the way you find your winning edge this year.
Speaking your language.
Yes. I love systems.
We'll just keep moving forward and keep getting better.
Now, one of the things I wanted you all to write down, I don't expect that we talk about this right now, but what is a consistent problem that needs a better system in your business? You can, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you want to have a conversation, you can. But one of the things I was thinking is just jot down a few ideas so that when you guys meet after this, you can start actually saying, hey, this is a system that I need. This is a system I need. I don't have to find a solution, but this is a thing that consistently is a constraint on our growth. How could we upgrade a system? Or just jotting down some ideas.
Cool if we take 2 minutes to do that?
Yeah.
So do me a favor, so we need to figure it all out right now.
Yeah.
Well,
Not
just,
the game.
and this, you don't have to do it right now either.
Yeah.
Just think about, so if we're gonna talk about what Brian's talking about, and we're gonna, form our ideas that way and forming new habits, write down some cues,
Okay,
and then write down the outcome, and then
Okay.
we'll figure out how to get there.
sure.
Perfect.
It's almost like a system of if-thens.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. I mean, in our business, it is. I mean, we have to come up with cues too for our employees that are
Mhm.
going to be, here is when you come to us. here's when you don't, you know, and
Yeah.
we may not have all the answers, but most you can use it as our roadmap. Hey, this is different, but it's pretty similar to this, so I'm gonna go this roadmap.
Perfect.
Yeah, and this may not all pertain to us right now, but just thinking
Oh,
further
well, just keep it in
along
mind.
when we
Again,
have
it goes
more
back, it goes
employees.
back to Matt's presentation, right?
Yeah.
You bring ideas to the table, bring a
Yeah.
solution, and we can problem solve together and form a new habit to figure it out.
Now, here's the wonderful thing is you guys can all probably find five problems.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
Now, to build off this so it doesn't become an overwhelming process, and so you can understand what habits to develop and how you can influence those habits to move in the right direction, we're going to talk about keystone habits. So a keystone habit is the one habit that you put in place that starts to influence the others. So you don't always have to fix everything. We might want to look at what are the 20% efforts that create 80% of the results, or the 4% efforts that create 64% results. Because the 80-20 principle rounds up again. So you can look at the 4% efforts that create 64% of the results, and there's usually one thing that if it doesn't happen, shit hits the fan. And if there's one thing that does happen, deal gets closed, everyone's happy.
Yep.
So to talk about keystone habits, I want to share a little story with you. And this story started back in 2017, 2018. And what happened was one of my clients was really successful. He had sold a company for about $50 million, but his brother had a really successful company that he had built in Dallas that had about 3,500 employees. And he built it from scratch, started with nothing from the age of 29, and I met him when he was about 50. And he had me move in with him. So I lived with him in his home in Dallas, and I was his explicit trainer and coach. I worked with him and lived with him for 2 months, and then I worked with him on and off for about 2 years. He hired me and my wife. That was actually how we brought our businesses together, because at that point we were 2 coaches running simultaneous businesses. And I got a master class on business. Every training session was, how can I extract gold? How can I understand? And also, how can I serve this person? But like, we just would talk about business. I talk about the 6 human needs. As successfully as he wasn't motivated by significance. He was motivated by contribution. So I got to see, when you have that kind of life, what is the stress? What is the fear? What are the things that actually happen, which no one expects, because all they think is the good stuff you see on the front. They don't see the chaos behind the scenes. And then you also got to see the good. He's like, the most important thing is that I can continue to serve my team. It's like, when you have a company like me, which is where you guys are all going, your employee becomes your customer. He's like, my customers are my employees.
Yeah.
He's like, so if I'm not taking care of them, then they're going to leave. So the point is, that was my experience. This is me in his living room. And then he had this gala that he threw. So did Gatsby. It was really a remarkable experience. But I share that because there was this one conversation that we had that really personifies keystone habits. And he said, Brian, the first thing I do every day is I check my profit and loss. And the same thing happens in every branch for every branch owner. And in fact, we built a system of technology that we developed that lets us know if they checked in and checked their profit and loss, or if they didn't. And if they do, they get a mark, and that helps them continue to advance. And if not, they get a phone call from our head office. So it was so important for him, especially he's in the mortgage business. He's like, the margins are so small, we have better margins than everyone else, and that's why. And if you think of where he grew up and how he grew up, you don't know that story, but he didn't have anything, so he was obsessed about savings. And even there's a whole other conversation about money that every time I talk to him, he's like, Brian, I give a damn. I have no shits about how much money you make. I want to know how much you saved. So like, his mindset on money was just completely different than everything I had ever heard, and that makes sense why this is his keystone habit. And so his keystone habit for his company was just the daily profit and loss check. Every day, let's make sure that's happening, because that informs us of our other decisions, right? So you start to see how these habits stack together. So, hey, in the morning, the cue is, I get the urge to check my profit and loss, I review my profit and loss, and the reward is some level of career growth. But that starts this whole other cycle where that cues you to look for cuts. That cues you to start looking, hey, where are we spending money that we don't need to spend? And then obviously the increase is more profits. One of my favorite conversations he had was the first time I met him. He goes, we're just talking about business and life, and he's like, I want to share a funny story with you. Last year, I looked at my profit and loss, and we have all these branches, and we paid, as I'm looking through the line items, we spent like 15 grand on DirecTV for every office to have in their office. And he's like, that's stupid. Netflix is only $4.99.
Right, fire
Right.
He's
yeah,
like, why don't-
it's these streaming
He's like,
things,
why don't
yeah.
we just cut Netflix? And the cost differentiation was about $7 grand.
Yeah.
So but he's, you know, his company's got 3,500 employees. They have all this money. And he's like, all my friends are like, why are you obsessed?
Worrying
Like at that
about-
small, like
yeah.
it's $7 grand. It's like, and he's like, and that's why I am where I am.
Yeah.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
point is, that's how he stacked his habits.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
inside the business that you're building, or even in your own life, it's like, what's the small habit that you can use to trigger the others?
Yeah.
You don't need to fix everything.
Mhm.
The goal is that you start fixing one or two things. Because when you're trying to fix everything, you get into chaos, and then there's no hierarchy of importance. Unless things start moving in the right direction.
Mhm.
Now to build off this, I want to talk about Alcoa. So Alcoa is an aluminum company. Matt told me that you guys used to work with them.
Back in the day, yeah, he used to be one of my customers.
Alcoa Steel.
Yep. So when in the 1980s, Paul O'Neill steps in as CEO. Everyone's kind of skeptical. He was this Washington, D.C. bureaucrat who had a history of actually analyzing the government's habits. Apparently he didn't do a good enough job. But he had this history of analyzing the government's habits, or different habits in different industries inside the government, or say branches in the government. And he steps in and he says, hey, you know, we've been struggling in Alcoa. And everyone was talking about whether he was going to say how we're going to grow the business, or how we're going to increase our margins, where we're going to expand our products. And he gets on stage and says, I intend to make Alcoa the safest company in America. I intend to get us to 0 injuries. You know, you got to think Alcoa is smelting, big machines.
Yeah.
But everyone was like, what's that have to do with profits? What's that have to do with revenue? What's this have to do with culture? Well, the truth is,
A ton. Yeah.
but that's not what they expected.
Yeah.
So he started this process where every time there was an injury, there was a whole set of habits that would happen. And he built it as part of the culture. So when an injury happens, that was the cue. There was the urge was to communicate and talk about it. The action was management makes a report, and then the reward was those people who kept reporting had career growth. That started, though, another set of habits where once the report arrived, there was an urge to improve the system. So they would review, they would audit and then correct, and they reduced all the injuries in the company. Now again, what does this have to do on culture and growth? More cooperation between managers and unions, less accidents, which means less turnover of employees, less lag on employees, because when things are working, there's not the need to replace someone when they're hurt. It's also the need to allow products that are being used to not be wasted. If something gets wasted on the floor, that causes a whole new chain reaction. And so what people didn't really understand is what he was trying to aim at, but the results were astounding. In the first year, record profits, and by the time he left, there was 5x, so 500% growth in the company, and they became the safest company to work for. So again, one small habit influenced others. And it started to change the whole culture of the company because people became more proactive, they talked more, they were more excited to share ideas. So that's the whole goal, is how can we take one habit and change the others? Everyone tracking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Simple other examples of Keystone habits, just so we can hit this home. Michael Jordan, before every single game, would sit down with a new pair of sneakers and lace them up himself. To the point where that was his routine before every game. And his trainer at one point came in and laced them up because he was running late. And Jordan comes in and says, hey, what'd you do? Why did you do this? And he rips out the sneakers, the laces, and he sits down and does them all himself. Because that's his keystone habit, to say, it's game time. It's not just superstition, it's this is how I spend time before the game, get myself in the zone. Tom Brady, for the last 20 years, would run onto the field when it was time to have the game start and scream at the top of his lungs, and the crowd would go nuts. That's a keystone habit that does two things. It says, we're here to play as a team, gets the fans involved because it's all energy. What do you think that does to the opponents?
Scary.
Yeah.
Massive intimidation, because now, even unconsciously, they know they're about to go against Tom Brady. How many, I don't know if you ever watched the Atlanta Hawks game, but they're standing on the sidelines, 28-3, they're down, and the players are saying, we're not done yet because they have Tom Brady. He had built such a psychological advantage through not his skills, he wasn't that great of a quarterback, it was his state and it was precision. So again, that small habit,
You said he wasn't that great of a quarterback?
he's not, if you look at Tom Brady's skills, not the greatest athlete, he doesn't,
He was really low,
Statistically.
like, he was really like not, like he was very low in the draft.
Peyton Manning is better statistically.
Yeah.
Drew
well,
Brees is
not
better.
anymore. But Tom Brady did not have the strongest arm. He wasn't mobile. He ran like a 5'2". I'm faster than Tom Brady. He had I think 3 things. He did have some accuracy, so he had the talent, but what he really had was the leadership and the emotional state. He had the skills which could continue to be refined, but what made him great was his psychology. So the point is, though,
I'm just a fan.
I'm
just putting you
I'm a
through
New
that.
England. I grew up in New England.
Yeah, you probably don't know.
I'm a
I don't
huge.
know if I've ever met a bigger fan. So.
I'm a huge Tom Brady fan.
Yeah.
But I still also know that these were the things that also made the world a difference. So again, one positive routine that causes a massive ripple effect. So again, what is the one consistent constraint in the operations? How could we fix that with one routine? It's just being able to figure it out. And then what happens is if each one of you come to the table and say, I think this is a problem. Like this thing really comes up every week at the same time. We don't really have an effective system for it. How can we build one habit around it? And my goal today is not that you fix everything, it's just that you can start to think this way. And what's also a piece to tie down is when you think of these habits, the urge isn't as important as the cue, action, reward. So the urge is going to happen. Just think, when this happens, what do we do, and what are we trying to get from it? So again, you can write down a couple constraints, just taking notes. Goal would be to bring this back to Matt and continue to build off of it. I'll give you about 30 seconds or so. Goal is not to overwhelm you. There's a lot of things that you could focus on. There's a lot of things you could take away from this. So what I really want to hammer home is that it's important to leverage small habits. The reason why it's important is because there's power in tiny gains. So if you get 1% better every day for a year, you get 38% better. So it compounds. Whereas if you get 1% worse, you continue to fall through, nothing changes. So your goal with diet soda or soda is not to go from drinking 0 soda or drinking 10 cans to 0. The goal is to figure out how can I, A, build awareness around this, start implementing a new habit, and then continue to improve. And then the next question is, well, if that's the result, why is that the result? Because if you're not following through on a habit, you're not following through on a procedure, there's either not a clear definition of what you're moving towards, or there's not a clear enough purpose. If there's a weak purpose behind everything, if there's no purpose behind it, then why would I change it? And then the question is, well, why do I need to change it? If I don't need to change it, then that's fine. And that's where choosing the right habits come in. What's the goal? What's the purpose? And then the habit is the map. The habit is how you get there. Lindsey and I hired Tony Robbins' team this last year. Spent $35,000 to have his coaches teach our coaches everything that Tony teaches. And the first principle, one of the first frameworks is RPM. At any point in time, what's the result, what's the purpose, and then how do we get there? Most people manage tasks, and that's why they're overwhelmed. If we can manage to a result and we understand why that result happens, if I know the result and I understand why the result is important, then the actual way that we move changes. So if my result, let's say I'll use fitness as an example. If I was someone who wanted to lose 30 pounds, right? And the purpose was that I wanted to feel more confident in my body. Well, there might be certain actions I would take that would help me feel more confident. I might go to the gym and lift weights. maybe I feel really confident to do a 5K. Like there's maybe a challenge where I need to push my comfort zone. Where someone comes to me and says, I want to lose 30 pounds, but the purpose is longevity. I want to be around for my grandkids. I want to be able to play with my grandkids. Their way to get in shape is going to look completely different than the first person. So if we can define the result and understand the purpose, the way we're going to move through the problem is going to look a little different. Again, business, let's say our result is to make $3 million this year. Well, what's the purpose? The purpose is to grow. Well, the way that we're going to invest our capital is going to look different than if the purpose was to have cash on hand. If the goal is, hey, $3 million and we want to be profitable so we can continue to expand, right? Maybe it looks a little different. Maybe we want to buy another company. So the purpose is to buy another company, to acquire a company. Well, hey, maybe we need to cut our expenses so we can continue to stack cash. So when that company comes around, we can acquire it. The purpose and the map are linked together. So for your habits, know the result, know the purpose, and then the habits can be simple. And then if we just focus on 1% better, it makes it really easy. So you don't have any questions?
Tracking good.
Okay, I'm going to tie it down. You can answer this question for yourself, but what is the 1%? You just think of that. I'm not going to have you write on it, but what is the 1% that would influence you to be better? And then yourself, as a leader in the company, what does the 1% action look like for the company? And then what can screw this all up? What screws up this whole talk? Well, the first thing is stress. Stress is the one pattern that causes us to go back to all of our other patterns. Has anyone been really consistent on something? You're doing really great, you're motivated, and then all of a sudden something happens and you're like, oh, I fell back to my old ways. It's because we have certain habits for how we manage our state when we're in stress. So a lot of people that I work with, the main culprit for their inability to stay healthy has nothing to do with them working out or them being on a diet. It has everything to do with the way they manage stress. Because they get a urge to manage themselves, they turn to food as a reward. It's relaxation, it's my brain's not focused on the problem. So stress, but also your state management. It's not just stress, but how do you manage your state? How do you handle a problem? One thing Matt's talked about is I had to learn how to handle my state. It's like, yes, because if we're engaging, anytime I push against something, it pushes against me. So if we're trying to push someone to do something versus stepping back and saying, how do I get this person to do what I want them to do? Changes the way that I engage in the process. So state, lack of execution, which is just not knowing your result, not knowing your purpose, and then losing sight of the main goal, a lack of focus, and then internal conflicts, not holding each other accountable, not being a team for the other person. Like if I see someone who's, I work with my wife, so we've done a lot of work to implement state and stress management and all those things because we were living in a household working remotely as we built this company, and it was like this. Mostly because she had her own patterns and I had my own patterns, and then when they would come up, she was a good mirror for me, and same for her. But the internal conflict is now being able to build the awareness when she's in a state of stress, being like, all I know that she needs is love. So I love you. I really want to help you. What can we do? So I've changed my state whereas I'm a hard D on the disc profile, which is I speak directly and I solve problems, and she's here like, oh, we're not making leads. And it's like, what do we need to do? How do we fix the problem? Not very well received from someone who just wants to feel loved and relaxed.
Right.
And also that's what she needs in order to think and communicate and work through the problem. So again, internal conflict isn't just are we a team, it's are we holding each other accountable? Am I able to listen to you when maybe you're falling off track or we're not implementing the habit? And little things like that make the world of difference. So I want to help you and tie this down by getting some clarity and leverage. I know I've talked about a lot. The first thing we have to do is define what you don't want. So rather than all the habits that you wanted, all the wonderful ideas, I want you to answer the question, what would you do this year to make sure it was horrible? What would you do this year personally to make sure that you had a bad year? What is the things that you would do for yourself that you consistently do that would ensure you had a horrible year? Now, this is called inverse thinking. It comes from Charlie Munger. It's like it's really hard at times to define exactly what we have to do to be successful, but it's really easy to define what we wouldn't do to make sure that we were not successful. So again, how would you take care of your body? How would you show up to work? What would you think? What would your habits be? We'll just have you take maybe 60 seconds. What are some of your habits? If you want to personally make sure this is a horrible year, where you didn't grow, you weren't happy, what would you do? And to build off of this, once you have some time or some answers, what would you do to be terrible as a company? If you wanted to make sure that you didn't grow as a company, if you wanted to make sure that things were horrible, nothing grew, customers hated you, how would you treat them? How would you work together as a team? What would you not do? What were your daily habits look like? What would you focus on? How would you ensure that you didn't grow? What's an answer you got, Matt? What's something you would do as a company to make sure you didn't grow?
Stop having L10 meetings.
What
Not
about
have
yourself?
SOPs.
Ignore problems, ignore the phone, emails.
No? What do you need?
I couldn't think of anything because I'm not that type of person. I know. You know, whatever. I put just to be a terrible employee, you know, not do what I'm expected to do.
But you never do that.
No, of course not. I'm a worker bee.
Peyton, what'd you get?
Focus on making money regardless of how it makes my employees feel.
Yeah. But then Anita brought up a quote by saying I'm a worker bee. I put on my personal one, work more but not efficiently. Because sometimes I think you mentioned it, the long hours. I think the more I work or the more dedicated I am, then that's the right answer.
Yeah.
And that's not always the right answer.
Yep. That's good awareness.
So I think that's we're both that way, being
Mhm.
aware that that doesn't always solve the problem.
Yeah. And that's, again, just awareness. Because this is the good news. We just described hell,
Yes.
right? So that's what you need to avoid, right? And build awareness. Hey, sometimes I'm being a really horrible boss right now. I'm, pushing people around, or I'm not listening. Maybe I'm being a really bad leader, not really executing on things that I know I need to do, but no one would actually see. So, yeah, right? But now we get to define heaven, right? So this is where I take everything and just condense it down, because we want to define an outstanding year. So for yourself, just 2 or 3 habits. What would you do to make this year outstanding? What would make it a 10 out of 10 year? This is what I was doing daily. These are the things I focused on. Personally, this is what I do. I take care of my body. I tell my husband I love him. I read 5 pages of a book. I show up to work on time. Just thinking, what would make this year outstanding? Doesn't have to be perfect. Small daily wins. And then next, let's shift over a little bit to the company. It was outstanding to work for this company. For people who were knocking on your doors and being like, I really want to work for that team. Where you had the kind of company where people were reaching out to you and asking you for a job. And saying, I don't know how I can work for you, but I need to. What would that kind of year look like? What would make it outstanding? What would some of the habits be? How would you treat your customers or employees? How would you work together? What would you focus on? What would those daily habits look like? I'd love to hear a share. What would you do to be outstanding?
What would I like for work?
Yeah, you pick both, yeah.
So I think outstanding, personal would just be present for my family when that's the time, being present. That's a mindset, and then for company, I think, so my word for the year, which took me a lot longer to figure out, but my word for the year is trust, because I tend to be a person who, and you can ask my husband, I think that I want the help and I want the team, but I also think I do it best.
Yes.
So trusting those around me.
Guilty.
And sometimes that means, like Anita said, something that just means sitting on something or, you know, whatever that means. But I think that's my big one, trusting this team, trusting my husband at home, trusting those around me. My kids are right now with my dad and my stepmom, who collectively raised 5 people. Me being one of them who's sitting in this room right now,
Safe,
making what I
healthy.
make,
Yeah.
healthy, having a nice home. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, did my dad wipe her butt the way that I would have wiped her? Are they feeding Lucy the way and no, they're not doing anything the way I would do it, but tomorrow when I go to pick them up, they're going to be happy and
You're gonna be
healthy.
spoiled and loved.
Yes, but it's a trust. I don't trust them, and I should trust them more because I have no reason not to trust them. So,
That's good awareness.
Love that.
That's great, and that's going to show up in the work too.
yes.
Love it.
Yes.
Fantastic. Matt, what about you? What would you make this year outstanding?
Spend more quality time with Krista and Jacob. Be present when the
Yeah.
time calls for it. And then monitor the sales process daily. Have some kind of reporting system set up so I can see the KPIs daily and not just wait until weekly meetings.
That's great. Love that. Payne, what about yourself?
Personally, I actually want to stick to commitments I've made. So like I set up my piano and it's a keyboard and I want to actually learn piano.
Love that.
But I get so frustrated I just quit and I leave it alone for multiple months. So I just want to like stick to a commitment. And then work-wise, I just want more people working with us that are productive. So salespeople actually finding them and doing a good job.
That's great. Love it. What about yourself, Anita?
For me, mine was consistency is key too for this year. A lot of things in my personal life, my day, wake up and give my time and my first time to my Savior and give him his time before anything. You know, we talk about our phones and, you know, I'm scrolling, I'm doing all this and before I get in the shower. No, do that, use that time to get my devotion and the consistency with that. I get consistent for a few months and then I fall off, you know, and that's with everything.
Same,
That's with, I'm a fitness instructor. My students see me struggle, go up and down too, and I tell them consistency is key, you know, so I'll be 50 years old this year. So this is my golden year. I want to be 50 and fine, you know, so I want it to be a certain thing, but it's a lifestyle. It's not just, you know, I know what to do to lose a few pounds. I know what to do to make this go. I know what to do, but that consistent lifestyle change and not, I just want to be a gym rat or the balance, you know.
Love that.
And for work, it's a balance too for work, you know, and I want to build that gap for the carriers and the dispatcher and that relationship, keep that growing, building that relationship with my carriers, knowing that, you know, I have their best interests at heart, knowing that, so that when they see our loads, they want to give us a call over someone else who has that same load that maybe it's a little money difference, you know, trusting that maybe they give me a call and say, can I get $100 more? And I say, I ain't got it this time, you know, I got you next time. I use that all the time, but I ain't gonna give it to them. They gonna forget, but you know, just having that you know, that relationship. I just want to continue to have that and be able to pass that along to, you know, people the next generation.
Great.
Love that.
Perfect.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, tying it down, last pieces that just take away. Habits follow a cycle. Remember the cues. Remember that there's a reward attached to it. So if you can identify those two, you can identify the action. Because even if you think of the reward as a customer who wants to be satisfied, there might be a totally different cue, totally different response, and we're still ending up at the same reward. So figuring out how do we get that same reward. Systems are nothing more than routines, sets of habits. And then a keystone habit is just a small win that makes a massive change. So thinking again, how can I make small wins the focus? There's a lot of strategies that might fall in place, like putting your phone on the other side of the room and then putting your devotional on top of your phone, so when the alarm goes off, the first thing you grab is the devotional. There's little strategies that you can put in place, but making them small is really what you want to aim at. Because the goal is just to be 1% better every day. We can build on that, trusting someone right now. That's progress, right? Trusting a stranger with information about you that you're telling me about trusting people is progress, right? So all those things compound, and that's how you ultimately win the year. So that's how you're going to close the gap. All these little habits. Questions, comments, anything to add?
Nope.
Well, thank
Great,
you
man.
so much.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
I
is-
appreciate it. Glad that was helpful. And
So helpful.